Thank you very much for inviting me to present. So my name is Dr. Sigobodhla. I'm from the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, SAHPRA. So my topic of presentation today is the environmentally persistent pharmaceutical products. And I support what Zuki has just presented with more information on the topic and what could be the possible regulatory interventions. So basically, I'm going to deal with pharmaceuticals versus EPPPs, sources of EPPPs, what is the growing concern, what are the regulatory interventions in place, and what are we aspiring to have in future, and then nationwide interventions. So I think everyone understands what pharmaceuticals are. These are compounds manufactured for use as medicinal drugs, and we have, as regulators, assessed them for quality, safety, and efficacy. We are also overseeing their development process, the licensing, the registration, manufacturing, marketing, and labeling, and we regulate those strictly and nationally. So we dedicate a lot of time to enforce these rules and guidelines when it comes to pharmaceuticals. However, Zuki mentioned earlier on that unfortunately through various means, they can also end up in our environment. And so we end up with those which accumulate, and they are the ones which we call environmentally persistent pharmaceutical products. And these are waste pharmaceuticals or their derivatives or residues that have been deposited intentionally or unintentionally in the environment, where they persist and may cause harm and are unwanted. I think David spoke earlier on the sources of these EPPPs and mentioned that we have thousands of compounds that are used as pharmaceuticals, both for human and animal use, and tons of these medicines are consumed globally every day. Now, in South Africa, we are also following the same trend. Our pharmaceutical industry is a major contributor to the economy. If you look at the trend, in 2010 alone, the sales were contributing to about 40 billion, and 9 years down the line, we're sitting at 80 billion. So there's a high consumption of these pharmaceuticals, both from the human medicine side and the veterinary medicine side. So when you have these medicines accumulating in the environment, you end up with unintended adverse effects on the marine or the aquatic species. And obviously, if it ends up in drinking water, like Zuki mentioned, we also suffer other effects she mentioned earlier on. And I'm passionate about animals, so I also mentioned that we also endanger certain of our protected species like vultures, and the endocrine disruption story she mentioned on the human side, but we also have it on the fish production side, where we end up with reproductive failure in fish. And I think one of the most discussed topics in the last 10 years is antimicrobial resistance. And this is also due to wide use of antibacterial agents in human and veterinary medicine. On the other side, I'm just showing you the sources, which are from households and non-domestic points. And I think it is important to note that whatever we use, if disposed of, it ends up in surface and groundwater, in the soil. And even when we incinerate those drugs, we end up with some of that waste in the atmosphere. So what is the growing concern? The growing concern is, how do we monitor these and regulate so that we end up with acceptable quantities or limits in our environment? I'm glad Zuki spent some time speaking to those international multilateral agreements that we have in South Africa. And what we did then is we sat down as departments. You'll see in my last slide, in the next slide, and we have come up with evidence-based programs. So we thought it was important. I think one of your questions is, what are we doing in South Africa? So there is lots of information out there, and Zuki is right. It's not just integrated properly and put together nicely so that our policies can be informed. So because we have a fragmented legislative framework, it has become very difficult for us to implement some of these plans. So it was decided through environmental affairs that a policy framework that encompasses a systemic integration, implementation, and strict enforcement plan be put in place for these EPPs in South Africa. All regulators are board. So we got invited from Department of Health and South African Health Products Regulatory Authority as well. This subcommittee also includes Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Remember, they also register pesticides and other pharmaceuticals, environment, forest and fisheries being the host. Department of Transport, very important, because without good distribution and transportation practices, you end up with unintended spillage of these products in the environment. Trade and industry, very important. Vulki mentioned how porous our borders are, and it was high time that we also had them, including the International Trade Administration of South Africa, ITAC, Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation Department, and the Health Professions Council of South Africa. And I think I've always thought we need to also include the body which oversees prescribers like your South African Pharmacy Council. We also have the South African Veterinary Council involved. So in terms of inventory, what has been done between 2019 and 2020, there was an inventory of environmental persistent pharmaceutical pollutants done, and a paper was written up to inform the committee or subcommittee on what is out there in South Africa. The following primary sources of EPPs in environment were identified, things like our wastewater treatment works, the agriculture activities, mainly through livestock farming. And if you look at our fish farming, for example, we have what we call flow-through systems. So here you have people damming rivers, and then they divert the water to those ponds. They also let the water out as well. But you can imagine if you throw antibiotics in there to treat certain fish diseases, especially the ones which involve the skin, what will happen to the antibiotic that you have used? Because these are flow-through systems, definitely quite a bit of those antibiotics will be washed into the rest of the river. Inappropriate disposal of unused medication at the household level. I'm glad that Prof already confessed, and I think if we look at the destruction of unused medications or expired medications in the pharmacies, in proportion to the population in South Africa, is very, I think it's just minuscule. It's too small, far too small. We could be doing much better than that. Medical and veterinary waste, we've spoken to that. And then leachate from landfills containing improperly discarded pharmaceutical products. And the human excreta that enters the water treatment works. And some of these are poorly equipped to adequately remove these products from treated waste water effluent that enters the natural environment. I think to date we have about 9 for this treatment works in South Africa, and lo and behold, not all of them are in their business. So I'll carry on with the inventory. So 10 priority EPPPs were identified, and I'm glad. It's also interesting to note that from other countries, they identified these painkillers like your paracetamols, penicillin, the ARVs, tenofovir, hydrochlorothiazide, dolutegravir, enalapril, isoniazid, metformin, hydrochloride, codeine, and synthetic hormones. Now, this is interesting because if we look at the selection of the drugs, it's actually based on a combination of the South African disease burden and the essential medicines list. Also, it's also related to the sales volume in both public and private hospitals, and also from the reported occurrence, persistent, and risk caused by these EPPPs. So this also provides an indication of consumption as well as environmental persistence and risk. I must say there's been quite a bit of work which was done, apart from the hard biscuit area which you mentioned, Prof, also from our VAU area and several other rivers in the country. So as regulators, what should we be doing? I think that's the burning question which where we should be asking now. So when I'm talking of regulators, I'm not only talking about SAHPRA. We are talking of all these stakeholders. They are supposed to be regulating these, EPPPs. So there are various strategies which can be adopted, which have also been used by Scandinavian countries. So you have upstream strategies adopted, which include good manufacturing practice. And I think if you imagine that more than 80 billion cells being seen in South Africa every year, you can imagine how much of that is being manufactured, how much of that is being imported. And as a result, we need to make sure and police the industry to make sure they adhere to good manufacturing practices, and they also dispose of the waste in the right manner. Marketing or market authorization, we do that very well at SAHPRA. We are very stringent, and I know even Act 36, they are also stringent with their requirements, technical requirements for registration. And I've been walking through the dossiers. We do have environmental risk assessment, pre-authorization sections, where we look at the principles, for example, in the human veterinary medicine side, we follow the VICH guidelines 6 and 38, which define how you, they actually have a decision tree to show you how you arrive at whether this product is of high risk or low risk. So there's a stepwise approach that you use in the screening process, where phase 1 deals with the low risk, and if anything has high risk, then you move on to phase 2. So all this happens pre-registration, and it is based on exposure limits. We need to make sure we are notifying the public of what is registered and putting that on our websites. Our package insights and patient information leaflets, I think some of you have seen our guidelines pertaining to these package inserts. They're under the special precautions. We really insist that the used medicines or waste materials derived from such medicines must be handled appropriately. In other countries, I've noted that they talk of eco-labeling. It's something which is quite interesting, and I think we should, as regulators, start going in that direction as well. And then we have midstream strategies where we talk of good storage, distribution, and transportation practices. You can imagine when it comes to veterinary products, it could be buckets and drumloads of products that are being used on the farm, and therefore they should be stored appropriately and far away from uninformed persons and obviously from your animals. And you should also prevent unnecessary spillage, distribution as well, and transportation practices. Downstream strategies. This is something which I think we need to be really raising awareness on. Although sometimes I wonder when our municipalities collect these products, what they do with them. I'm assuming they are incinerating the products. I'm assuming there is someone from a regulatory board who is overseeing the process to make sure these measures are implemented as well. So education and awareness amongst our pharmaceutical companies, amongst the professionals, and the general public. I think that's very important. We tend these days to put everything on social media. We're forgetting our local newspapers. We're forgetting, we've even forgotten to address people, coming to clinics, people coming to hospitals. How often do we talk about this? Are we streaming these things on the TVs, on radio? I know it could be a budget issue, but I think if we work together, we can achieve this. Disposal via garbage, that also needs to be taken care of because we are actually culprits on that. And waste immobilization. The municipal wastewater treatment works is a big issue. I don't think we have enough of those plants. And if we do, I think you have seen some documentaries on TV when things went wrong in other provinces or areas of Gauteng, and there was spillage of sewage, and the army had to come in and assist. So those are things which we really need to make sure we upgrade and make sure they are in working order all the time. Incineration is very important, thermal desorption and chemical decomposition. All those are measures that we are supposed to be taking care of. So nationwide, I think Zuki has mentioned this, that we really need a stricter policy implementation and policing all these activities as well. We need to be reviewing and amending and developing applicable policies and regulations. I think by bringing everyone on board, it's actually helping us a lot to see where the gray areas are, the gaps are, overlaps are, and we're trying to sort of harmonize our approaches towards this area. Enforcement of the National Environment Management Waste Act, and all its relevant regulations, as well as piloting pharmaceutical return and take back program. I'm emphasizing that again. Zuki mentioned this, data collection and reporting protocols. I think there's lots of data. I remember someone from Water Research Council saying that there is lots of information, they're forever collecting that data, but what are we doing with it? Are we pulling it together and reporting? How are we reporting? Where are we reporting? To whom are we reporting? And I think it's important that we do something about that. The local and international collaborations and funding opportunities for research and development. Zuki emphasized that, and I think we need to take it up from there. Partnerships with universities, and I think there are some students here. We are looking forward to do some research after graduating. Infrastructure development, I've mentioned that we need to increase the number of these treatment facilities, upgrade them as well, and also make sure, I think Zuki mentioned that some of them might not really efficiently remove these wastes from their treatment works. I mean, some of the technologies we have, might not be good enough, so we need to really upgrade them and develop proper analytical infrastructure. Stakeholder engagement, education, and awareness raising. I think we are doing that, and we have been really working hard as a committee to make sure that we, in various sectors, lead and cadmium was one sector. We had your pesticides, and now we're talking of EPPPs. So we hope the right audience is being reached. And thanks to Prof. Katerere, that at least we are going to be streaming this, much more broadly than we could have done on our own. So when you talk of other alternatives, I'm always asking myself questions like, what could be the other alternatives which we perceive to be safer, which could be affordable and effective and accessible and technologically relevant? So those are questions we need to answer as we seek alternatives. At the same time, if we look at how big our pharmaceutical industry is, we also don't want to end up contradicting our national policies with regards to employment. We don't want to kill the industry. So whatever we do, we should be mindful of that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sigobodhla. Do we have any questions or comments? Gertrude, you're in Lesotho or Botswana. Any comments?
Absolutely. Yes, I'm in Botswana just now, but from Lesotho. Not a question, but in terms of comments, I so totally agree that the way we handle our waste compared to how much we are using, we still are doing baby steps. And when you think how potent these molecules are, which we use for health, and you think that they go out into the environment, it's kind of shocking. In Lesotho, we don't even yet have a strong regulatory body that controls that. But the Ministry of Environment, they are good at that, especially with this issue of cannabis. I think the members here are aware that Lesotho was the first to give a license for medicinal cannabis. Because of that, then the environmental ministry became very strong.
We might soon start having cannabis compounds coming in, and we are going to start picking those up as well. And Dr. Sigobodhla, at regional level, I didn't see any real emphasis at regional level with Zazibona involvement, because South Africa is not an island, so we could have the best policies, we could even be able to police those, but as long as we have neighbors, we are just as weak as our neighbors would be, right? A chain is only as strong as its links are.
Yes, I do agree with you, but charity begins at home. If you listen to my presentation, I spoke about how fragmented we are in terms of
even internally.
Yes, so we needed to put that right first and then move on to the rest of because if we, the good thing is we've also included our ITAC and our DTI, and we know our borders are porous. So I think the next move would be to look at this at a regional level.
Okay. I think Zuki, very quick comments before I move on to Professor Patrick.
Thank you, Prof. I just want to say we need you as researchers to work closer with policy developers, because there's still not real understanding of the adverse effects, so that then this can be prioritized. Typical example, virtually everywhere in Africa, disease burden, the budget goal there is high. Then if the Minister of Health were to sing the same music with Minister of Environment, Agriculture, and so forth, understanding that, and customs, that if we nip this problem at the bud, ensure that we are using safe alternatives, and also put systems in place, come with industry partnerships, for example, to come up with a mandated, practical, accessible take-back mechanisms, so that people don't throw expired medicines and so forth in the toilet and so forth, or in the bin. We need that, because each and every country. Thank you.
So look, we have a lot of students here, and actually our idea is to come up with a few research projects that hopefully will not cost anybody a lot of money. And the students are listening, and my students are very keen to get into this. So, and I'm glad that we're having this talk. So, let's see what comes out of it. Thank you for those comments. Right. Professor Patrick, over to you, and thank you very much for coming through.